He asked for a quiet mail-order bride, but the woman who arrived carried a storm in her eyes. The first thing Nathaniel Reed saw was not the train. It was the woman stepping down from it like she had escaped from one life and dared the whole West to stop her from beginning another. For 3 years, Nathaniel had told himself he did not need beauty in his house. Beauty was trouble. Beauty made a man dream when he should be working. Beauty made him forget fences, cattle, unpaid debts, and winter hay. Beauty had a way of lighting up a room, then leaving it colder than before. So when he had written to the marriage agency in St. Louis, his words had been plain and careful. Send a steady woman. Plain is fine, strong hands, quiet nature, no fancy airs, no woman who expects poetry where there is only work. He had meant every word. But now, on the dusty platform of Mercy Creek Station in the summer of 1876, Nathaniel knew the agency had either ignored him or laughed while reading his letter. The woman standing at the train steps was not plain. Her dark auburn hair had come loose beneath her small traveling hat, falling in wind-tossed waves around a face too striking for the tired little station. Her dress was simple, deep blue and travel-worn, but she wore it like it belonged in a ballroom instead of a frontier town with crooked boardwalks and mule tracks in the street. Her eyes were the color of amber held against sunlight, bright, searching, and far too awake. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He had expected a woman who would look grateful to be chosen, someone timid enough to accept a hard life without asking too many questions, someone who would fit into the house he had built, the routine he protected, and the silence he had kept since his first wife died. This woman looked like she might kick down every locked door inside him. She paused at the bottom of the train steps, one gloved hand gripping a battered carpetbag. For a moment her proud face flickered with something almost hidden, not fear exactly, something sharper, a woman holding herself together by will alone. Nathaniel stepped forward. "Miss Clara Whitcomb." Her eyes found him at once. She looked him over from his dusty boots to his worn black hat, then back to his face. Most women would have blushed or lowered their gaze. Clara did neither. "You must be Mr. Reed," she said. Her voice was smooth, but tired around the edges. "Nathaniel," he corrected, because that was what a husband ought to say to a bride, even one he had never seen before. A faint smile touched her mouth. "Then you may call me Clara." The train hissed behind her. A cloud of steam rolled between them and drifted away. Around the station, men pretended not to stare. 2 women near the ticket window whispered behind their fans. Old Amos Bell, who ran the freight office, leaned on a crate as if this were the finest entertainment Mercy Creek had seen all month. Nathaniel felt heat crawl up his neck. "You are not what I was told to expect," he said before he could stop himself. Clara's smile faded, but she did not look wounded. She looked as if she had expected the blow and had prepared her chin for it. "No," she said quietly, "I imagine I am not." Nathaniel shifted his weight. His conscience pricked him. He had not meant to sound cruel. "I asked for someone plain," he said. "Someone used to work, someone who would not mind a rough ranch." "And you think beauty means I cannot work?" The question came sharp enough to cut. Nathaniel looked down at her carpetbag. The leather was cracked at the corners. One handle had been stitched by hand with dark thread. Her gloves were clean but mended. There was dust along the hem of her dress and a small tear near the cuff of one sleeve. "Not spoiled, then. But not simple either." "I think people often bring more trouble than they mean to," he said. For the first time, something in Clara's eyes changed. A shadow passed there, quick and deep. "On that," she said, "we may agree." Nathaniel should have asked what she meant, but men who had lived long enough on the frontier learned not to pull at every loose thread. Sometimes a whole coat came apart in your hands. He took the carpetbag from her. Their fingers touched briefly. Her hand was cold despite the heat. "The justice is waiting," he said, "if you still mean to go through with it." Clara looked past him toward the town. Mercy Creek was not much to see. A bank with peeling white paint, a saloon with one broken window, a dry goods store, a church bell hanging crooked above a little chapel. Beyond the town, the land rolled wide and brown under a merciless sky, with blue mountains standing far off like promises no one had kept. "I came 700 miles, Clara said. "I do not turn back easily." There it was again, that hidden steel. Nathaniel nodded once and led her toward the wagon. His team, Buck and Mercy, stood tied near the water trough, switching their tails at flies. Clara stopped when she saw them, not out of fear, out of interest. She set one hand gently against Buck's neck before Nathaniel could warn her. The horse stilled. Nathaniel watched in surprise. Buck did not like strangers. He especially did not like quick hands or nervous voices. But Clara touched him with calm certainty, her palm resting where the horse could feel it. "You know horses?" Nathaniel asked. "A little," she said. That usually meant no, but the way Buck lowered his head told a different story. Nathaniel helped her onto the wagon seat. She gathered her skirts carefully, then sat straight-backed, her face turned toward the church. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. Neither spoke as the wagon creaked down the street. But the town spoke for them. Men looked up from hitching rails. Women peered through store windows. A child pointed before his mother pulled his hand down. The news would spread faster than a grass fire. Nathaniel Reed had sent for a plain bride and brought home a woman pretty enough to make every wife in Mercy Creek suspicious and every idle man foolish. He hated that thought. Not because of her. Because of what it stirred in him. He had spent 3 years making his life narrow enough to survive, wake before dawn, feed stock, mend fence, check water, eat, sleep, do not remember too much, do not want anything that can be buried. Then Clara Whitcomb stepped off a train, and the world suddenly seemed too large again. The justice of the peace married them above the dry goods store, in a room smelling of ink, dust, and old paper. The ceremony took less than 10 minutes. Clara spoke her vows clearly. Nathaniel noticed only once that her voice trembled, and only on the word "stay." When he slid the thin gold ring onto her finger, he saw a faint bruise beneath the edge of her glove. His eyes lifted. Clara pulled her hand back before he could look too long. Another thread. Another question. After the ceremony, Mrs. Bell from the freight office served as witness and gave Clara a stiff little nod that was not quite welcome. The justice signed the paper, blew on the ink, and wished them luck in the same tone a man might use for someone riding into bad weather. Outside, the sun had begun to lower, throwing long gold bars across the street. Nathaniel loaded Clara's bag into the wagon. She stood beside the wheel, looking toward the east where the train tracks vanished. For a moment, her face softened with grief. "You leaving someone behind?" Nathaniel asked. Clara blinked and turned to him. "No," she said. It was too quick. Nathaniel had heard enough lies in cattle deals and courtroom disputes to know when a person answered before truth could catch up. But he only nodded. "My ranch is 12 miles north," he said. "Road gets rough after the creek crossing." "I did not expect satin cushions." "No," he said, climbing onto the wagon. "I reckon you did not." She looked at him then, and for the first time her smile reached her eyes. It changed her whole face. Nathaniel looked away faster than he needed to. They rode out of Mercy Creek as the town bell struck 5. Behind them the station shrank, then the church, then the last thin line of town. Ahead the open land waited. For the first miles they said little. The wagon wheels groaned over ruts. Dust rose behind them in a soft brown trail. Meadowlarks called from fence posts. A jackrabbit darted across the road and vanished into sagebrush. Clara watched everything. Not like a frightened city woman. Like someone memorizing the shape of a battlefield. "That ridge," she said at last, pointing north, "is that your land?" "Part of it. Reed Hollow starts past those cottonwoods." "You named it Reed Hollow." "My father did. He died before he could build much there." "And your first wife?" Nathaniel's hands tightened on the reins. The question was not cruel, just direct. Still, it landed in the wagon like a stone. "Anna died of fever," he said, 3 winters ago." Clara lowered her gaze. "I am sorry." Most people said those words because manners required them. Clara said them softly, as if she understood that grief was a room a person never fully left. Nathaniel kept his eyes on the road. "She was kind," he said, "gentle, never raised her voice, never asked for more than I could give." Clara was quiet for a while. Then she said, "And you wanted another woman like her." Nathaniel did not answer. The truth was worse. He had not wanted another Anna. No one could be Anna. He had wanted someone who would not make him feel enough to compare. Clara seemed to hear the answer in his silence. "I should tell you something," she said. The wind moved a strand of hair across her cheek. She did not brush it away. Nathaniel waited. "My name is Clara Whitcomb," she said, "but the agency may have told you I was mild, obedient, and eager to live quietly." "They did." "I paid the clerk $2 to write that." Nathaniel turned his head. For the first time that day, he nearly laughed. Clara lifted her chin. "I needed a way out, you needed a wife. I thought honesty could come later." "That is a strange kind of honesty." "Yes," she said, "but still more honest than the life I left." The words hung between them. Before Nathaniel could ask more, Buck snorted and tossed his head. Mercy slowed beside him. The team had reached the creek crossing, where the road dipped between 2 low banks lined with willow. Nathaniel saw the tracks first. Fresh hoofprints in the mud. 4 horses, maybe 5. Not his, not any neighbors he knew. He pulled the wagon to a stop. Clara noticed at once. "What is it?" Nathaniel reached beneath the seat and drew out his rifle. "Trouble passed here not long ago." The color left Clara's face, but she did not scream. She did not clutch his arm or ask foolish questions. She looked toward the willows, then toward the rising slope beyond the creek. "Are they still near?" "Maybe." A branch snapped somewhere beyond the trees. Nathaniel lifted the rifle. Clara went perfectly still. From the shadow of the willows, a rider emerged and stopped on the far bank. He was broad-shouldered, dressed in a fine dark coat too clean for the trail. 2 other men appeared behind him, both rough-looking, both armed. The man in front smiled. Nathaniel's mouth went dry. "Evening, Reed," the rider called. "Heard you went to town for a bride." Nathaniel did not lower the rifle. "Move along, Silas." The rider's eyes slid to Clara, slow and bold. "Well now," Silas Crow said, "Mercy Creek was wrong. They said you ordered plain." Beside Nathaniel, Clara's hand closed tightly around the edge of the wagon seat. Silas smiled wider. "Seems to me," he said, "a woman like that might make a man forget which land is worth fighting for." Nathaniel felt Clara look at him. And in that single moment, with the creek between them and danger waiting in the trees, he understood something cold and certain. His new bride had not just brought beauty to his door. She had brought a past that might already be chasing her. Nathaniel kept the rifle steady, though every muscle in his body had gone tight. Silas Crow sat on his horse on the far side of the creek as if he owned the water, the road, and the very air between them. He had the look of a man who had never built anything with his own hands but had spent his life taking from men who did. His dark coat was brushed clean. His boots were polished. A silver watch chain flashed against his vest. The two riders behind him were not so polished. One had a scar pulling down the corner of his mouth. The other chewed tobacco with slow, ugly patience, his hand resting close to his pistol. Nathaniel did not like the way either man looked at Clara. "Road is open," Nathaniel said. "Use it and keep riding." Silas smiled as if Nathaniel had said something amusing. "Still unfriendly after all these years," he said. "A man might think you don't appreciate neighbors." "We are not neighbors. Your north fence touches my grazing lease. That lease is being challenged." Silas's smile thinned. The creek moved softly over stones. A dragonfly skimmed the surface, bright blue in the evening light. Everything else seemed to hold its breath. Clara sat beside Nathaniel without moving. He could feel her fear, not because she showed it, but because she was too still. The woman who had studied every ridge and bird and fence post now watched Silas crow with the frozen calm of someone who had seen danger before and knew better than to waste breath denying it. Silas's gaze slid back to her. "Forgive my manners," he said. "I have not introduced myself to Mrs. Reed." Clara's fingers tightened in the folds of her skirt. Nathaniel spoke before she could. "You don't need to." Silas laughed softly. "Protective already. That is touching." He leaned forward in the saddle. "Tell me, Mrs. Reed, did your husband explain what kind of valley he brought you into, or did he only speak of cattle, fences, and hard work?" Clara lifted her chin. "My husband has spoken enough." The words were quiet, but they struck Silas like a slap. His eyes sharpened with interest. Nathaniel's chest tightened. Clara had called him her husband with no hesitation, though they had been married only an hour. It should not have mattered, but somehow it did. Silas looked between them. "Well," he said, "maybe this arrangement will be more entertaining than I expected." Nathaniel moved the rifle a fraction higher. "That is enough." For the first time, Silas's face showed a glimpse of the man beneath the charm. Cold, hungry, easily angered. "You have been warned, Reed," Silas said. "The valley is changing. Small ranchers who do not learn to bend are going to break. I would hate for your new bride to suffer because you are too stubborn to understand simple business." Clara's eyes flicked toward Nathaniel. He knew what she heard, a threat wrapped in fine manners. "Get away from my crossing," Nathaniel said. For a moment, no one moved. Then Silas tugged his reins and guided his horse aside. His men followed. But as Nathaniel drove the wagon down into the shallow creek, Silas remained on the bank watching Clara with that same measuring look. The wagon wheels splashed through the water. Buck tossed his head, nervous from the tension in the reins. Nathaniel kept one hand on the rifle and one on the lines until they reached the far side. When they passed within 10 feet of Silas, the man spoke softly. "Welcome to Mercy Creek, Mrs. Reed." Clara did not answer. But Nathaniel saw her hand move to her glove, pressing over the place where he had seen the bruise. Only after the wagon climbed the slope, and the riders disappeared behind them, did Nathaniel lower the rifle. "Who is he?" Clara asked. "Silas Crow." "That tells me his name, not what he is." Nathaniel almost smiled at the sharpness of it, but the weight in his chest would not allow it. "He owns the Crow Basin outfit west of here, or he says he owns it. Land papers in this valley have a way of getting changed when Silas wants something. And he wants your land." "He wants the spring on my north pasture," Nathaniel said. "It feeds the only year-round water between my place and the basin. Without it, my cattle suffer. With it, he controls every small ranch north of town." Clara looked back down the road, though Silas was gone. Has he threatened you before? In ways a court cannot hold. That means yes. Nathaniel guided the team around a washout in the road. Yes. The sun had dropped lower. The sky turned copper at the edges, and the shadows of the mesquite stretched long across the trail. Somewhere ahead, a hawk cried from the ridge. Clara was quiet for several minutes. Then she said, "He is used to being obeyed." Nathaniel glanced at her. "Yes. I have known men like that." The words were small, but something about them pulled Nathaniel's attention. He did not ask, not yet, but he remembered the bruise, the quick lie at the station, the way she had gone still when Silas looked at her. A man could read tracks in mud if he knew what weight made them. A woman could carry tracks inside her soul. They rode another mile before Clara spoke again. "I did not bring him here," she said. Nathaniel frowned. "What?" "Whatever you are thinking, whatever past you believe followed me, Silas Crow is not from my past." "I never said he was." "No," she said, "but you thought it." He could not deny it. The wagon rattled over stones. Dust rose around the wheels. "I saw fear in you," Nathaniel said. She turned sharply. "You saw caution." "I know the difference." For the first time since stepping off the train, Clara looked truly angry. Not loud, not wild, worse, controlled. "Do you?" she asked. "Or do you believe every woman who looks over her shoulder must be guilty of something?" Nathaniel felt the words land harder than he deserved. He looked toward the trail. "No." The answer was rough but honest. Clara's face softened just a little, though she still held herself tight. "My father is a judge in Virginia," she said at last. "A respected man, a powerful man. People lower their voices when he enters a room. They call him honorable because he owns a fine house and quotes scripture before supper." Nathaniel listened. "He wanted me to marry a man named Warren Pike, a railroad investor, twice my age, rich enough to buy silence and old enough to think a wife was furniture with a heartbeat." Her mouth trembled, but she steadied it. "I refused." Nathaniel's hands tightened around the reins. "What happened?" Clara looked down at her gloved hands. "My father reminded me that a daughter has few choices when the law belongs to men who dine at the same table." The wind pushed dust across the trail. Nathaniel understood more than she said. The bruise beneath her glove, the way she had bought a lie from the agency clerk, the way she stepped from the train as if the platform were not an arrival but an escape. "I am sorry," he said. Clara gave a small laugh with no joy in it. "Do not be. I am not here for pity." "I was not offering pity." She looked at him then. "What were you offering?" Nathaniel did not know how to answer. He had been alone too long, and words of comfort felt clumsy in his mouth. He could mend a broken gate, calm a spooked horse, set a fence post straight in hard ground. But speaking gently to a woman with pride in her spine and hurt hidden behind her eyes was a different labor. "The truth," he said. "A woman should not have to run 700 miles to be treated like she has a soul." Clara turned away, but not before he saw her blink hard. They reached Reed Hollow as the last light was leaving the sky. The ranch sat in a shallow bowl of land, with cottonwoods guarding the creek and a low house standing beyond them. Smoke-dark stones made up the chimney. The barn leaned slightly at one corner but held firm. A corral stretched beside it, where 3 horses raised their heads to watch the wagon approach. To Nathaniel it was plain, weathered, unfinished, a life built with tired hands. To Clara, it seemed to be something else. She leaned forward a little, eyes moving over the roofline, the garden fence, the windmill creaking in the breeze. "This is yours?" she asked. "Ours now," Nathaniel said before thinking. The word changed the air between them. Clara glanced at him. He kept his eyes on the team. "It is not much," he added. "House has 2 rooms. Kitchen roof leaks in hard rain. Barn needs work before snow. Garden is half dead and the stove smokes when the wind turns south." Clara looked at the little house again. "It has a door that is not locked from the outside," she said softly. Nathaniel felt those words in a place deeper than speech. He stopped the wagon near the porch. 2 dogs came racing from the barn, barking with fierce importance. One was a black and white cattle dog with one torn ear. The other was yellow, lean, and suspicious. "Easy," Nathaniel called. "That's Boone and Sally." Clara climbed down before he could help her, then held out her hand to the dogs. Boone circled her twice before sniffing her glove. Sally watched from a distance, eyes bright and doubtful. "She does not trust quickly," Nathaniel said. "Neither do I." Sally moved closer, as if she understood. Nathaniel carried Clara's bag inside. The house was clean because he had worked half the night making it so, but no amount of sweeping could make it elegant. The main room held a table, 2 chairs, a shelf of tin plates, a stove, a Bible, a rifle rack, and the old rocking chair Anna had loved. The bedroom door stood partly open. A quilt lay folded at the foot of the bed, blue and white, carefully mended. Clara stepped inside and went silent. Nathaniel mistook the silence for disappointment. "I told you it was rough." She shook her head. "It is honest." There was that word again. She crossed to the shelf and touched the spine of a worn book. "Longfellow?" she asked. "My mother S. You read poetry?" "Sometimes. When no one is watching." Nathaniel looked at her, expecting mockery. He found none. "Winter nights are long," he said. Clara smiled faintly. "So are lonely ones." He felt the truth of that settle between them. Outside, a horse shifted in the corral. The wind pressed against the walls. The first star appeared in the window above the washstand. Nathaniel cleared his throat. "I will sleep out here," he said. "You take the bedroom." Clara turned from the shelf. "We are married." "Yes." "People will expect." "People are not in this house." The words came out firmer than he intended. Clara stared at him. Nathaniel looked away, embarrassed by his own roughness. "I did not send for a wife to trap her," he said. "Not in my bed, not in my home. We will learn each other first." For a long moment, Clara said nothing. Then she removed one glove slowly. Beneath it, the bruise on her wrist was dark against her skin, fading yellow at the edges. She saw him notice it, and this time she did not hide it. "My father's man," she said quietly. "The night before I left, he grabbed me at the stair when I tried to take my mother's necklace." Nathaniel's face hardened. "Did he follow you?" "I do not know." That was worse than no. A knock struck the door. Both of them froze. Boone began to growl. Nathaniel reached for the rifle on the rack and stepped toward the door. Clara stood behind him, one hand pressed to her bruised wrist, her face pale but steady. The knock came again. 3 slow strikes. Not frantic. Not friendly. Nathaniel lifted the latch an inch and kept his boot braced at the bottom. "Who is it?" A man's voice answered from the dark porch. "Message for Clara Whitcomb." The name struck the room like a gunshot. Nathaniel looked back at his bride. Clara's lips parted, but no sound came. The man outside spoke again. "Her father says the marriage means nothing if the papers were signed under a false name. He says she belongs back home." Nathaniel did not open the door any wider. The night outside had gone quiet in that strange frontier way, as if even the insects had paused to listen. The lantern on the table threw a weak yellow light across the floorboards, leaving the corners of the room deep in shadow. Boone stood low and stiff near Nathaniel's boot, teeth showing. Sally had backed toward Clara, but her growl was just as steady. "Say that again," Nathaniel said. The man on the porch gave a dry little laugh. "I reckon you heard me plain enough. Judge Whitcomb wants his daughter returned. He says she had no right to marry under deception. Says any man sheltering her is interfering with family business." Clara's face had gone pale, but her eyes did not break. She stood near the bedroom door, one hand at her throat, the other still wrapped around her bruised wrist. Nathaniel's voice stayed calm. "What is your name?" "Elias Vane." Nathaniel knew it, not the man but the name. He had heard it once in Mercy Creek, spoken by a stage driver who said there was a hired tracker out of Kansas who could find a lost horse, a runaway debtor, or a man hiding under another man's roof. Elias Vane was not known for kindness. "What do you want tonight, Vane?" "Just to deliver the message." "Message is delivered." Nathaniel started to close the door. Vane's boot hit the threshold from outside. Boone lunged with a sharp bark, and Nathaniel pressed the rifle barrel lower, not pointing at the man's chest, but close enough to make the meaning plain. "Move your boot," Nathaniel said. A moment passed. Then slowly the boot withdrew. Vane's voice lost its polite edge. "You do not want trouble with Judge Whitcomb." "I already have trouble standing on my porch." "She is not worth it." Nathaniel felt Clara flinch behind him, and that small sound settled something inside him like a stone dropped into water. "She is my wife," Nathaniel said. "You will speak of her with respect or not at all." The porch boards creaked as Vane shifted his weight. "Wife," he repeated. "That is a pretty word for a deal made through a mail agency. You think a church paper in a frontier town will stand against a Virginia judge? I think this is my land, my door, my rifle, and you are standing on the wrong side of all three." For a long moment, Vane said nothing. Then he laughed softly. "Frontier men always mistake distance for freedom. The law reaches farther than you think, Reed. So does a good horse. Ride yours away." Nathaniel shut the door and dropped the bar into place. He stood there a moment listening. A man could tell much from the way trouble left. Angry men stomped, cowardly men hurried, dangerous men went quiet. Elias Vane went quiet. Only after hoofbeats faded into the dark did Nathaniel lower the rifle. Clara was still standing in the same spot. "I did not know he would come," she said. Nathaniel turned. "I believe you." Her breath shook once. "You should not." "Why?" "Because I lied before I even met you. You told me the truth before nightfall. That does not erase the lie." "No," he said, "but it tells me what kind of person you are when fear loosens its grip." Clara looked down, as if his steadiness hurt more than anger would have. The room felt smaller now. The walls that had seemed simple and safe an hour ago felt thin against the whole dark world outside. Nathaniel crossed to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The yard lay silver under moonlight. The corral was still. The barn door hung latched. Nothing moved beyond the cottonwoods. Still, he knew Vane had not gone far. Men like that did not travel miles through dusk just to speak and vanish. "We need to know what papers he means," Nathaniel said. Clara looked up. "The agency papers. Maybe my age, my name, my family consent. I signed as Clara Whitcomb. That is my true name. I am 24. I need no permission." "Then what deception?" Her mouth tightened. "I told the clerk I had no living family who would object." Nathaniel drew a slow breath. In Mercy Creek, that might not matter. In a larger court with the wrong judge and the right money, it could be twisted into trouble. "My father will say I was not of sound mind," Clara continued. "He will say I was confused, emotional, influenced by improper books, wicked ideas, or some man. He will say anything that makes me smaller. Nathaniel watched her hands. They were no longer trembling. She had moved past fear into anger, and anger suited her better. Was Warren Pike the man he meant you to marry? Yes. And Pike wants you back. Clara's eyes went distant. Warren does not want me. He wants what marrying me gives him. What is that? She hesitated. Nathaniel waited, but this time she did not answer quickly. My mother left me money, Clara said at last. Not in my father's hands, not fully. It becomes mine when I marry or turn 25. Father managed it while I was unmarried, but he could not keep it forever. Warren Pike's railroad scheme is failing. My father invested heavily. If I married Warren, my inheritance could be used to save both men. Nathaniel felt the shape of the trap now. The mail-order agency, the false description, the escape, the man on the porch. Clara had not run from discomfort. She had run from being sold. How much money? He asked. Enough to make greedy men patient for years, and cruel for one night. Nathaniel glanced again toward her bruised wrist. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Clara saw it. Do not make that face, she said. I did not tell you so you would take up some noble rage and get yourself killed. I am not planning to get killed. Men rarely plan it. They just mistake pride for duty. That struck close enough to make him look at her. She lifted her chin, but her eyes were wet. Nathaniel, if my father sends lawyers, if he sends Vane with a warrant, if he brings this into court, your life here could be ruined. Your ranch could be tied in claims, fees, and public shame. You barely know me. I know enough. No, you do not. Her voice broke, and she looked away, ashamed of it. Nathaniel leaned the rifle against the wall and stepped closer. Not too close. He had learned already that Clara needed room to decide whether to stand or flee. What do I not know? She pressed her lips together. For a moment he thought she would close the door inside herself and leave him standing outside it. Then she crossed to her carpet bag, knelt, and opened the brass clasp. From beneath a folded blouse, she drew out a small velvet pouch and a packet of letters tied with faded ribbon. My mother wrote these before she died, Clara said. Some to me, some to a lawyer in Richmond. She knew my father too well. She arranged the inheritance so he could not touch the final portion unless I agreed. She handed Nathaniel one letter, then pulled it back before he could take it. There is more. Her voice had gone barely above a whisper. Nathaniel said nothing. Clara opened the velvet pouch. Inside lay a small gold necklace, simple and old, with a blue stone at its center. This was hers, she said. It is what his man grabbed me for. Father knew if I took it, I might also have taken the letters. Did you? Yes. She looked up at him. One of the letters says that if I ever feared being forced into marriage, I was to go west to my mother's cousin, a woman named Ruth Bellamy, in Colorado Territory. Nathaniel frowned. Then why come here? Because Ruth died last winter. I learned it too late. I had already paid passage. I had already broken with my father. The agency clerk offered another route when I panicked. She laughed once, bitter and small. A rancher in Mercy Creek who wanted a plain, quiet wife. Nathaniel understood then why she had looked east at the station. Not because she missed what she left. Because the road she had meant to follow had disappeared beneath her feet. You should have told me before the wedding, he said. I know. Why didn't you? Because I thought you would send me back. The honesty in that answer quieted his anger before it could grow. Outside, the wind moved along the porch, lifting dust against the door. Nathaniel walked to the stove and poured coffee into 2 tin cups, though the coffee had gone bitter from sitting too long. He handed one to Clara. She took it with both hands, as if the warmth mattered more than the taste. "I will not send you back," he said. Her eyes lifted. "You say that now." "I say it tonight. I will say it tomorrow. I will say it in front of Vane, your father, Warren Pike, Sela's Crow, and anyone else foolish enough to ask." Clara stared at him like she wanted to believe him, but did not yet know how. "You married me for work," she said. "I did." "You wanted a woman who would not disturb your life." "I did." "And now?" Nathaniel looked around the room, at Anna's rocking chair, at the mended quilt, at the table set for two, at Clara's carpetbag resting open on the floor, its contents half spilled like pieces of a life that had not yet found a place to settle. "Now I think a life that cannot be disturbed may not be much of a life at all." Clara looked down into her coffee. For a brief moment, the woman with storm-bright eyes seemed tired enough to lean. Nathaniel wanted to reach for her, but he kept still. Trust, he was beginning to understand, was not something a man could demand because vows had been spoken. It had to be built small. One honest word, one safe night, one door barred against the right enemy. A sound came from the barn. Not loud. A dull thud, then the frightened stamp of a horse. Nathaniel was moving before Clara could speak. He snatched the rifle, crossed to the door, and lifted the bar. "Stay inside." "No." He turned. Clara had set the coffee down and taken the smaller rifle from the rack. Her face was pale but steady. "Nathaniel, if this is about me, I will not hide while you face it alone. This is not bravery, it is danger. Sometimes they look the same." He did not have time to argue. They stepped out together. Moonlight washed the yard in cold blue. The barn stood black against the stars. Boone and Sally rushed ahead, barking. Nathaniel moved carefully, rifle ready, Clara a few steps behind him and to the left, exactly where she would not cross his line of fire. That detail registered in him even through fear. She had been taught something. Or she had learned fast because survival required it. They reached the barn door. Nathaniel pushed it open. The smell hit first. Smoke. Not from the stove, not from a lantern. Smoke from fresh fire. A feed sack near the back wall had been lit and shoved beneath the hay loft ladder. Small flames crawled upward, hungry and bright. The horses screamed. Nathaniel ran for the water barrel. Clara did not freeze. She dropped the rifle against a stall wall, seized a blanket from a peg, and beat at the flames with fierce, desperate swings. Sparks jumped around her skirt. Smoke filled the barn. Nathaniel threw the first bucket of water. Steam burst white in the dark. Together, coughing and half-blind, they fought the fire before it could reach the dry hay stacked above. By the time the last ember died, Clara's face was streaked with soot, and Nathaniel's hands were red from heat. The barn still stood. The horses trembled in their stalls but lived. Then Boone barked once outside. Nathaniel turned. Pinned to the barn door with a knife was a folded paper. He pulled it free and opened it under the moon. The message was written in a neat hand. "Send the woman before sunrise, or next time the house burns with her in it." Clara read over his shoulder. Her breath stopped. Nathaniel looked from the paper to the dark ridge beyond the ranch, where a rider could easily be watching. This was no longer a warning. It was a clock. By sunrise, Reed Hollow no longer felt like a home learning to breathe. It felt like a fort. Nathaniel did not sleep after the fire. Neither did Clara. They spent the last dark hours carrying water closer to the house, moving lantern oil away from the walls, checking every latch, every stall, every shadowed corner where a man might hide a match and a cruel purpose. The horses stayed restless until dawn, blowing hard through their noses whenever the wind shifted. Even Boone refused to lie down. He paced from the porch to the barn and back, nose low to the ground, searching for a scent that had already slipped away. Clara moved like a woman, holding herself together with thread. She did not cry. She did not complain. But Nathaniel saw the way her hands shook when she lifted a bucket. He saw her pause once beside the barn wall, pressing her palm against the blackened boards as if apologizing to the animals for the danger that had followed her here. The note lay folded on the table inside the house. Send the woman before sunrise, or next time the house burns with her in it. Nathaniel had read it so many times, the words seemed burned behind his eyes. When the first thin light touched the cottonwoods, Clara stepped onto the porch. Her hair was loosely braided, though strands had escaped around her soot-streaked face. There was a small burn on her sleeve and a red mark near her wrist where a spark had landed. She looked exhausted. She also looked more determined than any person Nathaniel had ever known. "I should leave," she said. Nathaniel stopped beside the water barrel. "No. You have not heard what I mean." "I heard enough." Her mouth tightened. "Nathaniel." He set the bucket down harder than he meant to. Water sloshed over the rim and darkened the dust. "No," he said again. "Not because I own you, not because some paper says you are my wife, but because leaving would not make you safe. It would only put you alone on a road where Vane can take you without a witness." Clara turned toward the open land beyond the corral. Morning had made the hills golden, but nothing about them felt gentle. "If I stay, your house may burn. If you go, you may disappear." She closed her eyes, and for a moment the fight went out of her shoulders. Nathaniel stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "Clara, look at me." She did. "I did not survive winters, drought, sickness, and Sela's crow just to hand a frightened woman over to a hired man, because he knows how to write a threat. I am not frightened." "You are." Her eyes flashed. "So are you." "Yes," he said. That answer stopped her. Nathaniel had never found shame in truth. A man who claimed not to fear fire was either lying or already dead inside. "I am afraid for you," he said. "I am afraid for this ranch. I am afraid of what men with money can do when law bends toward them, but fear does not decide for me." Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then her face softened, just enough to hurt him. "My whole life," she said quietly, "men made decisions around me and called it protection. My father locked doors for my protection. Warren Pike sent servants to watch me for my protection. Even the agency clerk lied in his letters and said it might protect me from rejection." She swallowed. "If I stay, it must be because I choose it." Nathaniel nodded once. "Then choose." The wind moved through the cottonwood leaves. A rooster crowed late from behind the barn. Somewhere in the creek grass, a frog gave one small sound and went silent. Clara looked at the road that led away from Reed Hollow, then at the house, then at Nathaniel. "I choose to stay," she said, "but I will not sit inside while others decide what my life is worth." "No one asked you to." "You were about to." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. "You have a very honest face when you're caught. I was going to ride to town and leave you with the dogs. And I am going with you. That is not wise. Neither was marrying a woman who paid a clerk to lie for her." Nathaniel let out a breath that might have become a laugh on a kinder morning. "You will ride behind me and keep your rifle covered until needed. I will ride beside you." "Clara." "Partners," she said. That word, spoken on the porch with smoke still staining her sleeve, settled heavier than any vow from the justice's office. Nathaniel looked at her, really looked at her. The wild beauty was still there, the kind that had made the town stare and made his own heart step wrong at the station. But now it was not her face that held him. It was the courage beneath it, the way she stood in front of ruin and refused to become smaller. "All right," he said, "beside me." They left for Mercy Creek within the hour. Clara wore a plain brown skirt split for riding, one of Nathaniel's old coats, and a hat pulled low to shade her face. She had cleaned the soot from her cheeks, but the smoke scent clung to her. Nathaniel noticed she had tied her mother's necklace beneath her collar, hidden but present, a small blue stone against her heart. They rode with Boone following for the first mile until Nathaniel sent him back. The dog obeyed with bad grace, stopping on the trail and watching them as if he alone had been left responsible for the whole ranch. The ride felt longer than 12 miles. Every rise could hide Vane. Every cottonwood shadow looked like a man waiting. Clara rode Pepper with a steadier seat than Nathaniel expected. She held the reins correctly, kept her weight balanced, and listened to the horse beneath her. Whoever had taught her in secret had done enough to keep her alive. At the creek crossing, Nathaniel dismounted and studied the mud. There were tracks. One horse. Recent. Clara stayed in the saddle, rifle laid across her lap beneath a folded shawl. "Vane?" she asked. "Likely. Going toward town or away?" Nathaniel crouched lower. "Both. He waited here, rode back toward town after the fire." Clara looked toward Mercy Creek. "He wants us to follow." "Maybe. Or he wants the town to see me as the trouble." Nathaniel stood and brushed mud from his fingers. "That may already be happening." Clara's face tightened, but she said nothing. Mercy Creek was fully awake when they arrived. Wagons stood outside the dry goods store. Smoke rose from the blacksmith's chimney. A line of children hurried toward the schoolhouse, their lunch pails swinging. Everything looked ordinary, which somehow made Nathaniel angrier. A threat had been nailed to his barn, and the world had gone on selling flour and shoeing horses. The staring began before they reached the sheriff's office. Men paused mid-conversation. Women leaned closer to one another. Someone had already spread the news. Nathaniel saw it in their eyes, not concern, curiosity, judgment. Clara kept her chin up. Sheriff Daniel Ward sat behind his desk eating cold biscuits from a tin plate. He was a narrow man with tired eyes and a mustache yellowed from tobacco. He looked up when Nathaniel stepped inside, then looked past him at Clara. "Morning, Reed," he said. "Mrs. Reed." Nathaniel laid the note on the desk. Ward read it once, then again. His expression changed, but not enough. "Where'd this come from?" "Pinned to my barn door after someone tried to burn it down." The sheriff leaned back. "Anyone hurt?" "No." "Lose any stock?" "No." "Then it is attempted mischief and a threat." Nathaniel stared at him. "Mischief?" Ward sighed. "Do not put words in my mouth. I said attempted mischief. It is a crime, but a note is not a witness. You see a face." "No." "Tracks." "One horse could be anyone." Clara stepped forward. It was Elias Vane. The sheriff's eyes shifted to her. "You saw him set the fire?" "No, he came to our door before it happened. He delivered a message from my father." Ward rubbed his jaw. "Your father being Judge Whitcomb." Clara's back stiffened. "You know of him." "Got a telegram this morning." Nathaniel went still. The sheriff opened a drawer and took out a folded paper. "Came from St. Louis by way of Abilene. Says Clara Whitcomb is wanted by her family due to concerns over coercion and questionable marriage contracts. Says a representative may arrive to escort her east until the matter is settled." Clara's face drained of color. "Coercion," she whispered. Nathaniel's voice hardened. She was not coerced. The sheriff held up a hand. I am telling you what it says. My father wrote that, Clara said, or Warren Pike did. Ward looked uncomfortable now, not cruel, not brave either. Mrs. Reed, I do not know your family matter, but when a judge from back east sends formal concern, I cannot ignore it. You can ignore a burned barn. The sheriff's mouth tightened. I can investigate it. When? Ward glanced toward the window, where two men had stopped outside, listening too closely. You must understand something, the sheriff said in a lower voice. There are men in this town who already think Reed Hollow brings too much trouble. Crow has been in and out of here all morning telling folks that Nathaniel took in a runaway woman, and now Eastern law will fall on Mercy Creek if we shelter her. Nathaniel's pulse went cold. Silas. Of course Silas would use it. He wanted the spring. If Clara's trouble weakened Nathaniel's standing, Crow would twist every whisper into a rope. Where is Crow now? Nathaniel asked. Saloon last I saw. Nathaniel turned. Clara caught his arm. No. He is stirring this. And he wants you angry. Nathaniel looked down at her hand on his sleeve. Her grip was firm, but her eyes were pleading. Please, she said softly, do not walk into a trap made for your temper. No one had spoken to him that way in years, not with command, not with care. The sheriff cleared his throat. There is one thing, he said. Nathaniel and Clara turned back. Ward tapped the telegram. If Mrs. Reed has proof she married willingly and is of age, that helps. If she has letters, legal papers, witnesses from the agency, anything showing she fled a forced marriage, that helps more. Without it, Vane may convince a county judge to hold her until the matter is heard. I have letters, Clara said. From whom? My mother. Ward looked doubtful. Dead women do not testify. Clara's eyes flashed. No, Sheriff, but living cowards often hide behind that fact. The words landed hard in the office. For the first time, Ward looked at her with something like respect. Bring the letters, he said, and whatever marriage papers you have. I will send a wire to the county clerk asking how far Whitcomb's claim can reach. Until then, stay close to your husband and do not leave the ranch alone. Nathaniel almost corrected him, not because the advice was wrong, but because Clara belonged to no one. But Clara answered first. I do not belong to my husband any more than I belong to my father, she said, but I will stay close because I trust him. Nathaniel felt those words strike deeper than he expected. Outside the sheriff's office, the boardwalk had gathered listeners. As Clara stepped down into the street beside Nathaniel, whispers followed like flies. Runaway bride. Judge's daughter. False marriage. Trouble woman. Then a clear voice cut through the murmurs. Nathaniel Reed. Silas Crow stood outside the saloon, hat tipped back, smiling like a man who had bought the morning and expected change. Nathaniel stopped. Clara stopped beside him. Silas's eyes moved over them both. Bad luck about your barn, he said. Frontier is no place for delicate arrangements. Nathaniel said nothing. Silas looked at Clara. Mrs. Reed, or should we still call you Miss Whitcomb until the courts decide? Clara's cheeks colored, but her voice stayed level. You may call me nothing at all, Mr. Crow. A few men nearby chuckled before catching themselves. Silas's smile tightened. Sharp tongue for a woman in a fragile position. Clara stepped forward half a pace. A woman only looks fragile to men who fear what she might say if allowed to speak. The street went quiet. Nathaniel saw the danger before Clara did, not from Silas's hands, from his eyes. She had embarrassed him in front of men he needed to impress. Silas bowed slightly. "Then speak carefully, Mrs. Reed. Words have consequences out here." "So do fires," Nathaniel said. Silas looked at him. "I would never burn a man's barn, Reed. Bad for the valley. But if trouble follows your bride, do not blame the rest of us for noticing." Before Nathaniel could answer, a rider came fast down the east road, horse lathered, hat nearly flying from his head. He reined in outside the telegraph office and shouted for the sheriff. "Stage got stopped near Miller Pass," he called. "Driver says a man with a Virginia warrant is headed this way. Says he has authority to take a woman named Clara Whitcomb into custody." The street turned toward Clara all at once. Nathaniel moved closer to her, not touching but shielding. Silas Crow smiled. Clara's hand found Nathaniel's sleeve again. This time her fingers were cold. The rider swallowed hard and added, "He'll be here before sundown." The words settled over Mercy Creek like storm clouds. "He'll be here before sundown." For one long breath, Clara heard nothing else. Not the creak of wagons, not the restless shifting of horses, not the whispers gathering like dry grass around a spark. The whole town seemed to narrow into one hard truth. Her father had reached across 700 miles and found her. Nathaniel stood beside her close enough that his sleeve brushed hers. He did not grab her hand. He did not tell her what to do. He only stood there, steady as a fence post driven deep into stubborn ground. That steadiness nearly undid her. Silas Crow watched from the saloon porch with open satisfaction. "Well now," he said, loud enough for half the street to hear. "Looks like Mercy Creek will have a legal matter on its hands." Nathaniel's eyes stayed on the rider who had brought the news. "What kind of warrant?" The rider wiped sweat from his forehead with a shaking hand. "I don't rightly know. Driver said the man had papers stamped proper. Said the woman was wanted for removal back east until a family court hearing." Clara's stomach turned. Family court. It sounded clean, respectable, civilized. It did not show locked doors, watched stairways, bruised wrists, or a father who smiled at guests, while stealing his daughter's future one polite word at a time. Sheriff Ward pushed through the gathered people and took the rider by the arm. "Come inside. Tell me exactly what you heard." The rider followed him, leaving the street buzzing. A woman near the dry goods store whispered, "Poor thing must be touched in the head if her family sent law after her." Another answered, "Or maybe Reed should have asked more questions before bringing home beauty from a mail-order office." Clara felt every word like dust thrown in her face. Nathaniel turned his head slightly. "We are leaving," he said quietly. "No." He looked at her. Clara's throat felt tight, but she forced herself to speak clearly. "If I leave now, every person here will think Silas is right. They will think I ran because the truth is against me. This street is not a courtroom." "No, but it is where judgment begins." Nathaniel studied her face. She could see the conflict in him. The rancher wanted to move her out of danger. The man who was slowly learning her knew she would hate being hidden more than being afraid. "What do you want?" he asked. The question was simple. It was also rare. For most of Clara's life, people had asked what was proper, what was expected, what was useful, what would keep peace, what would save reputation. Few had asked what she wanted. She drew a breath. "I want my letters from the ranch. I want our marriage certificate. I want the agency receipt. Then I want to stand before the sheriff, the town, and that man with the warrant and say I came willingly." Nathaniel gave one slow nod. "Then we ride fast." Silas stepped down from the porch as they turned toward their horses. "Running to gather a better lie," he called. Nathaniel stopped. Clara felt the air tighten around him. She touched his arm before he could turn fully. "Do not give him what he wants," she said. Nathaniel's jaw flexed, but he stayed still. Clara turned instead. Every eye in the street followed her. "Mr. Crow," she said, voice carrying clear. "A man who smiles at another person's fear usually has something ugly to hide." A murmur passed through the crowd. Silas's smile faded. Clara did not wait for his answer. She mounted Pepper with as much grace as her shaking knees allowed, gathered the reins, and rode out beside Nathaniel. Only when the town dropped behind them did her breath break. Nathaniel noticed. "You held well." "I was holding because if I did not, I might fall apart in the street." "Falling apart can wait until we get home." Despite everything, Clara let out a short, breathless laugh. "That is the most frontier comfort I have ever heard. It is all I have at the moment." But his eyes were gentle when he said it. They rode hard, though not recklessly. The afternoon sun burned white above the road. Dust kicked up beneath the horses and clung to Clara's skirt, her gloves, the damp hair at her temples. Every mile toward Reed Hollow felt like a mile stolen from a closing trap. At the creek crossing, Nathaniel slowed long enough to listen. No riders. No voices. Only water over stone. By the time they reached the ranch, the horses were sweating and Clara's heart was pounding. Boone and Sally came charging from the porch, barking with relief and alarm. The house stood untouched. The barn, blackened in one corner from the night's fire, still stood. Nathaniel swung down first. "Get the papers. I'll saddle Samson fresh and fill canteens." Clara hurried inside. The house looked different now. That was the strange thing. It had been hers for only one night, yet fear had already taught her where everything lived. The table with one uneven leg, the shelf with Nathaniel's books, the hook where his hat usually hung, the bedroom quilt folded with quiet care. She went straight to her carpet bag and pulled out the packet of letters, the velvet pouch, the agency contract, and the marriage paper from the justice. Her hands moved quickly until she reached the last letter, the one her mother had written in a slanted hand made weak by illness. "My dearest Clara, if the day comes when your father calls control by the name of love, remember this. Love does not cage what it claims to cherish." Clara closed her eyes. For one moment she was 12 again, sitting at her mother's bedside, listening to a voice already fading from the world. Then floorboards creaked behind her. She turned, expecting Nathaniel. It was not Nathaniel. Elias Vane stood in the bedroom doorway. Clara's breath stopped. He had entered through the back, quiet as smoke, tall, narrow, with a gray coat and pale eyes that seemed almost colorless in the dim room. "You should have left before sunrise," he said. Clara clutched the letters to her chest. Vane's gaze dropped to them. "Those must be the papers." She stepped back. "Nathaniel is outside." "I know." From the yard came a sudden sharp bark, then Sally yelping. Clara's blood chilled. "What did you do?" "Nothing lasting. Dogs sleep after the right powder. So do men, but your husband is harder to dose when he will not accept food from strangers." Clara's eyes darted toward the rifle rack. Empty. Nathaniel had taken the long rifle outside. Vane saw her look. "Please do not be foolish. I have no wish to harm you unless you make it necessary." Men like you always say that right before they make harm necessary. His mouth twitched. "Sharp, your father mentioned that." "My father knows nothing about me." "He knows you are worth a great sum if delivered before Pike withdraws his offer." The truth came out so plainly that Clara almost staggered. "So it is money." "It is always money, Miss Whitcomb." "My name is Reed." "Not for long." He stepped closer. Clara threw the first thing her hand found. A tin wash cup struck his shoulder, not hard enough to hurt but enough to surprise him. She used that heartbeat to dart toward the door. Vane caught her sleeve. Fabric tore. She twisted the way a stable boy had once taught her when a drunken man grabbed at her in a livery yard. Vane's grip slipped from her arm to her wrist. Pain shot through the old bruise. Clara cried out despite herself. The sound brought Nathaniel's voice from outside. "Clara!" Vane cursed and dragged her back, clamping one hand over her mouth. "Quiet!" Clara bit him. "Hard!" Vane jerked away with a hiss. She ran. This time she made it through the bedroom door and into the main room. Nathaniel burst in from the front just as Vane came after her. For a frozen second, all three stood in the same narrow space. Nathaniel's face changed when he saw Vane. No shouting, no wild threat. Just a coldness that frightened Clara more. "Step away from my wife," he said. Vane drew a pistol from inside his coat and pointed it at Clara, not Nathaniel. "Set down whatever you are carrying, Reed." Nathaniel held no rifle. He had left it outside when he heard her cry. His hands were empty. Clara saw his eyes flick once to the stove, once to the table, once to the wall where a branding iron leaned near the hearth. Vane saw it too. "Do not try to be heroic." Nathaniel's voice stayed low. "You are in my house. And she is under legal claim. No court ordered you to break into my home." Vane smiled thinly. "Courts hear stories after the facts are arranged." Clara felt the packet of letters still clutched against her side. If Vane took them, her mother's voice might disappear forever beneath her father's lies. The thought gave her courage. She slid one letter behind her back and dropped it through the gap between the wall and the flower chest. A small movement. Vane's eyes snapped to her. "What did you hide?" Nathaniel moved. It happened fast. He kicked the table into Vane's knees as Clara threw herself sideways. The pistol fired, deafening inside the house. The bullet shattered the glass lamp on the shelf. Oil spilled but did not catch. Vane stumbled. Nathaniel drove into him shoulder first, slamming him against the doorframe. Clara fell hard near the stove, breath knocked from her lungs. The two men struggled with brutal silence. No grand words, just boots scraping, fists striking, wood cracking under weight. Vane was wiry and quick, but Nathaniel fought like a man with a whole life behind each blow. The pistol skidded across the floor toward Clara. She reached for it. Vane saw and kicked Nathaniel in the knee, breaking free just long enough to lunge toward her. Clara seized the pistol with both hands and aimed it, her arms shaking. "Stop!" Vane froze. Nathaniel froze too, chest heaving. Clara had never pointed a pistol at a man before. The weight felt awful, final, wrong and necessary at once. Vane slowly raised his hands. "You will not shoot me." Clara's voice trembled, but her aim did not. "I hope you do not ask me to find out." Nathaniel took the pistol from her gently, never stepping in front of it until her finger had left the trigger. Then he struck Vane once, hard enough to send him to the floor senseless. Clara stood shaking, torn sleeve hanging loose, hair fallen around her face. Nathaniel dropped the pistol on the table and crossed to her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, then nodded, then shook it again. "I do not know." He reached for her, then stopped, waiting. That small pause broke her more than the fight. She stepped into him. Nathaniel wrapped his arms around her, careful but strong. Clara pressed her face against his chest and finally shook the way she had refused to shake in town. His shirt smelled of dust, leather, and the sun. His heartbeat was fast beneath her cheek. "I am sorry," she whispered. "No. This came because of me." This came because greedy men thought you could be taken. He drew back just enough to look at her. They were wrong. Outside, a horse neighed sharply. Nathaniel turned. A second rider had appeared at the edge of the yard, leading 3 saddled horses, not one of Vane's men. It was Sila's crow. He sat smiling beyond the gate, holding Nathaniel's long rifle across his lap. "Well," Silas called toward the open door, "that sounded lively." Nathaniel stepped in front of Clara. Silas lifted the rifle slightly. "I would not rush, Reed. I only came to offer help. Seems your bride has made a mess big enough for all of us now." Vane groaned on the floor. Clara wiped her face with the back of her hand, then bent quickly near the flower chest, feeling for the hidden letter. Her fingers found it. Her mother's words were still safe. Silas's voice drifted in again, smooth as poison. "That Eastern warrant arrives by sundown, but I can make this simple. Hand the woman over to her people, sell me the North Spring at a fair price, and Mercy Creek need never know how close your house came to scandal." Nathaniel did not move. Clara stepped beside him, torn sleeve, soot-marked cuff, papers clutched in one hand. Her fear was still there, but something stronger stood above it now. She looked through the open doorway at Sila's crow. "No," she said. Silas's smile hardened. "Clara lifted her mother's letter. And when that warrant arrives, I will be ready." Sila's crow did not expect Clara to say no. That was plain in the way his smile held for a second too long, like a cracked plate still pretending to be whole. He sat beyond the ranch gate with Nathaniel's rifle across his lap, his horse standing calm beneath him, his coat neat, his boots polished, his eyes full of the kind of patience that belonged to men who believed the world had always been built for them. Nathaniel stood in the open doorway, one hand close to the pistol on the table, the other slightly in front of Clara without touching her. Behind them, Elias Vane lay groaning on the floorboards, his wrists tied with a length of torn curtain rope. Boone and Sally had begun to stir outside, weak from whatever powder Vane had used but alive. Clara stayed beside Nathaniel. Her sleeve was torn. Her hair had fallen wild around her face. Her mother's letters were clutched against her chest so tightly the edges bent beneath her fingers. But her voice had not bent. "No," she had said. Silas tilted his head, studying her like a horse that had refused the bit. "No is a costly word out here, Mrs. Reed." "It was costly back east too," Clara replied. "I learned to say it anyway." Nathaniel's mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. Pride, maybe, or fear wearing the shape of pride because men like him did not always know how to show tenderness when danger was watching. Silas rested one gloved hand on the rifle stock. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." "No," Nathaniel said. "You and Vane did that when you came onto my land." Silas's eyes shifted to him. "Your land for now." The words were soft, but they carried. Clara understood then that this had never been only about her. Silas had seen opportunity in her trouble, yes, but the root of his hunger was still Reed Hollow. The North Spring, the water, the land Nathaniel had built with grief and stubborn hope. If Silas could make the town believe Clara's marriage was false, Nathaniel would become the foolish rancher hiding a runaway judge's daughter. If Vane dragged Clara away, Nathaniel would be left with scandal, legal fees, and a burned barn. Then Silas would come smiling with an offer for the spring. Men like Silas did not need to strike hard if they could make a person kneel from exhaustion. Nathaniel stepped out onto the porch. "Put down my rifle." Silas laughed. "I found it near your saddle, a careless place to leave a weapon with trouble nearby." "You stole it." "Borrowed," Silas said, "until tempers cool." Clara saw Nathaniel's right hand flex. He wanted that rifle back, not for pride, For safety. A ranch without its best long gun, with Vane tied inside and a warrant coming by sundown, was a house with one wall missing. Then Clara noticed something at the edge of the yard. Sally had risen. The yellow dog moved unsteadily behind the water trough, nose low, ears back. Silas's horse had not seen her yet. Clara did not look directly at the dog. She had learned in one day that survival sometimes lived in not showing where your hope was. She stepped onto the porch beside Nathaniel. Silas's eyes brightened. He liked an audience. He especially liked a woman placed where he could talk down to her. "Careful," Nathaniel murmured. "I am tired of careful men using careful words to steal open lives," she said. Then she looked at Silas. "You knew Vane would come here." Silas lifted a brow. "Did I?" "You knew about the warrant before the rider reached town. You were ready with your offer. You were waiting for the fire to frighten us, for Vane to take the papers, for Nathaniel to look desperate." Silas's smile returned, slower now. "That is a bold story." "It is not a story, it is a pattern." "A pattern." Clara took one step down from the porch. Nathaniel's hand moved, but he let her go. "You threaten land, you call it business, you spread gossip, you call it concern. You hold another man's rifle and call it borrowing. You stand outside a house after a hired man breaks in and call it help." Her voice sharpened. "Back east, men like you wore finer coats, but the pattern was the same." For a moment, silence held the yard. Then Silas clapped slowly, once, twice. A speech fit for a ladies' lecture hall. Clara's cheeks burned, but she did not drop her gaze. Silas leaned forward. "Mercy Creek will not thank you for bringing Eastern scandal into this valley. They will not thank Reed for choosing a woman's defiance over peace. They will not thank either of you when lawyers, warrants, and maybe federal men start asking why a judge's daughter was hidden here." "I was not hidden," Clara said. "I was married." "A marriage made under lies." "A marriage made by my own will." "Will?" Silas's smile turned cruel. "Mrs. Reed, do you truly think will matters more than papers?" Clara's fingers tightened around her mother's letters. "No," she said, "but I brought papers too." That flicker in Silas's eyes was quick, too quick for most to see. Nathaniel saw it. Clara did too. He had not known she still had them. Inside the house, Vane groaned again and shifted against the floorboards. Silas glanced toward the open door. Clara felt her chance arrive like a horse in the dark. "Vane can testify," she said. Silas went still. Nathaniel looked at her, but she kept her eyes on Crow. "He broke into this house. He threatened me. He tried to take my letters. He said Warren Pike needed my money. He said my father wanted me delivered before Pike withdrew his offer." Clara raised her voice a little. "And he arrived here knowing where to come because someone in Mercy Creek helped him." Silas's jaw tightened. "That man is a professional tracker. He did not need help." "Then why are you here?" The question hung in the yard. Sally chose that moment to bark. It was not loud, but Silas's horse startled. The animal jumped sideways. Silas grabbed for the reins with one hand, and Nathaniel moved like a spring released. He crossed the yard fast, low, before Silas could settle the rifle. Clara's heart jumped into her throat. Silas cursed and tried to swing the barrel toward him, but his horse danced again as Boone staggered up and barked from the porch. Nathaniel caught the rifle stock with both hands. The men struggled from opposite sides of the saddle. Silas kicked at him, missed, and lost one stirrup. Nathaniel twisted hard, using the rifle like a lever. Silas slid sideways and hit the ground with a heavy grunt. The rifle came free. Nathaniel backed away, breathing hard, now holding the weapon pointed safely low but ready. Silas rose slowly, dust on his coat, hatred no longer hidden beneath polish. "You think this settles anything?" he snarled. No, Nathaniel said, but it changes who is armed. From the road came hoofbeats. Clara turned, fear cutting through her. For one terrible second, she thought the warrant party had arrived early. But the rider coming down the trail was older, broad-shouldered, with a gray beard and a battered hat. Tom Alder, Nathaniel's nearest neighbor. Behind him rode his wife, Martha, sitting straight on a bay mare with a basket tied to her saddle. 2 more ranchers followed, then another rider Clara recognized from church. Tom reined in outside the gate, taking in the scene. Sela's dusty and furious, Nathaniel armed, Clara torn and pale, Vane tied inside the house. Well, Tom said slowly, this looks like a morning. Martha Alder dismounted before her horse had fully stopped. Clara, she said, hurrying to the porch, child, are you hurt? The kindness in her voice nearly broke Clara's knees. I am standing, Clara managed. That is not what I asked. Martha took Clara's wrist gently and examined the bruising with eyes that had seen births, breaks, burns, and grief enough to read pain without drama. Then she looked towards Sela's. What happened here? Sela's answered smoothly, recovering himself. A family matter from back east reached Reed Hollow. I came to keep peace before Nathaniel made a worse mess of things. Martha's face hardened. Peace does not usually leave a woman with a torn sleeve. Tom swung down and walked past Sela's without greeting him. Nat. Nathaniel nodded toward the house. Elias Vane broke in, tried to take Clara, tried to steal her papers. Fire last night was likely his doing too. Tom's jaw said. And Crow arrived holding my rifle and offering to make the scandal disappear if I handed her over and sold the spring. The ranchers behind Tom shifted in their saddles. Silas laughed, but the sound had no ease left. Careful, Reed, that is an accusation. It is testimony, Clara said. Silas looked at her with open contempt. From a woman wanted by her own father. Martha Alder turned on him so fast her skirt snapped in the wind. A father wanting a daughter does not prove he has the right to take her. The word struck Clara in the chest. For a moment she saw her mother not as a fading memory, but as a line of women standing behind her. Women who had whispered warnings, hidden letters, taught girls how to read, how to ride, how to keep their souls alive in rooms built to silence them. Tom stepped closer to Silas. You best ride away. Silas looked around. He was counting, measuring, deciding how much pride he could afford to lose. This valley is choosing foolishly, he said. No, Tom replied. For once maybe we are choosing together. Silas mounted slowly. His coat was dusty now. His face was no longer charming. Before he turned his horse, he looked at Nathaniel. The warrant comes by sundown. Your neighbors will not stand between you and law. Then he looked at Clara. And law has no patience for pretty speeches. He rode out hard, dust rising behind him. Only when he disappeared beyond the cottonwoods did Clara realize she was shaking. Martha put an arm around her shoulders. Come inside, she said. You need water, a clean sleeve, and a witness who knows how to speak sense. Inside, Vane had fully woken. He looked at the ranchers, then at the tied rope around his wrists, then at Clara with a hatred made dull by fear. Tom crouched beside him. Elias Vane, is it? Vane said nothing. Tom nodded toward Martha. My wife's brother is a deputy marshal in Santa Fe. I have seen enough papers to know a proper warrant from a family trick. When the man comes today, we will see which one he carries. Vane swallowed. Nathaniel noticed. So did Clara. You are afraid of the warrant man, Clara said. Vane's eyes flicked toward her. No. You are. Martha crossed her arms. Who is coming? Vane looked away. Tom leaned closer. Son, if that man arrives and finds you tied after breaking into a woman's home, the best thing you can have is a truthful tongue. Vane's face tightened. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Vane spoke, low and bitter. Warren Pike is coming himself. Clara went cold. Nathaniel stepped closer. Pike. Vane nodded once. With papers signed by Judge Whitcomb, he means to take her before the county can question it. Once she is on the eastbound stage, you will never untangle it. Clara gripped the back of a chair. Martha's hand found her shoulder. Nathaniel's face was calm, but his eyes were not. Then we do not wait at the ranch, he said. Clara looked at him. We go back to Mercy Creek. We go with witnesses, Nathaniel said. With the letters, with Vane, with every neighbor willing to stand where the whole town can see. Tom nodded slowly. Church steps, public ground. Sheriff cannot pretend not to hear. Crow cannot twist what everyone witnesses. Martha looked at Clara. Can you stand before them? Clara thought of the station, the whispers, the bruise, the locked doors behind her, the fire in the barn, the pistol shaking in her hands. Her mother's letter hidden by the flower chest because even in terror, some part of her had known truth must be saved. Then she looked at Nathaniel. He did not speak for her. He waited. Yes, Clara said, I can stand. They left near midday. Tom and the other ranchers rode around Vane, who was tied to his saddle. Martha rode on Clara's left. Nathaniel rode on her right. The letters rested inside Clara's coat, against her mother's necklace and her beating heart. As Reed Hollow faded behind them, Clara looked once at the small house, the blackened barn, the cottonwoods along the creek. A day ago, she had wondered if staying would destroy Nathaniel's life. Now she understood something different. The house was not safe because it had strong walls. It was safe because someone inside it had asked her to choose. Near Mercy Creek, dust rose from the southern road. A stagecoach had stopped by the church. Beside it stood a tall man in an expensive gray suit, his blonde hair smooth beneath a city hat. Warren Pike. Clara knew him even from a distance. Her throat tightened, but she did not slow. The town had gathered around him already. Sheriff Ward stood near the church steps with a paper in his hand. Silas Crow stood behind the crowd, watching everything. Nathaniel leaned close enough for only Clara to hear. Still beside me. Clara looked ahead at the man who had come to cage her in the name of law. Then she lifted her chin. No, she said softly, today you stand beside me. Mercy Creek had never looked so small to Clara. The whole town seemed gathered around the church steps, but the buildings still looked thin against the wide sky, like painted boards nailed against a wilderness that could swallow them all. Wagons stood crooked along the street. Horses stamped at hitching rails. Children had been pulled close to their mothers. Men leaned in clusters, their faces shaded by hat brims, watching the scene with the hungry silence of people who knew history was about to choose a side. At the center of it stood Warren Pike. He wore the frontier badly. His gray suit was fine enough for a Richmond dining room, but dust had already gathered at the cuffs. His boots were polished, yet he shifted his weight like a man offended by dirt. His blonde hair was combed smooth, his gloves spotless, his smile practiced. Clara remembered that smile. She remembered it across her father's supper table, polite and patient, while Warren spoke of railroads, investments, and how a wife's duty was to make a man's house peaceful. He had looked at Clara that night not as a woman, not even as a person, but as a locked strongbox whose key he expected her father to hand him. Now he saw her riding toward him beside Nathaniel, Martha, Tom, and the others. His smile changed. It did not disappear, it tightened. "Clara," he called, as if greeting a guest who had wandered too far from the parlor. "Thank heavens, we were afraid something terrible had happened to you." Clara stopped Pepper in front of the church steps. Something terrible did happen, she thought. I learned what you all planned. But she did not say it yet. Nathaniel halted on her right, Martha on her left. Tom and the ranchers spread behind them, not in threat, but in witness. Elias Vane sat tied on his horse between two men, his face bruised, his eyes low. Silas Crow watched from behind the crowd, arms crossed, his expression smooth again now that an Eastern man with papers had arrived. Sheriff Ward held the folded warrant like it had grown heavier since morning. Warren stepped forward. "Sheriff," he said, "this has gone far enough. Miss Whitcomb is clearly distressed. She has been misled into an invalid arrangement with a stranger. I ask that you release her into my care so I may return her to her family." Clara almost laughed. His care? Such a clean word for a cage. Nathaniel's hand stayed still on his reins. He had promised not to speak first, and he was keeping that promise, though Clara could feel restraint coming off him like heat from iron. Sheriff Ward cleared his throat. "Mrs. Reed says she married willingly." Warren's eyes flicked toward Nathaniel with polite contempt. "Mrs. Reed is not a legal certainty, Sheriff. The agency papers contain misrepresentations. Her family was not informed. Her mental state is in question. She is known to act impulsively under emotional strain." Clara felt the town shift around her. Those were the words her father loved. Not cruel, not mad, not trapped, just emotional, impulsive, unsound. Soft words used to strip a woman of the right to her own life. Warren turned to her. "Clara, I know you are frightened. Your father is not angry, he only wants you safe." Her fingers tightened on the reins. "My father sent a hired man to break into my home." A murmur moved through the crowd. Warren's expression did not change. "That is not true. Elias Vane is sitting right there." Warren barely glanced at him. "Mr. Vane was employed to locate you and ensure your welfare. If some misunderstanding occurred at the ranch, it is unfortunate, but hardly relevant to the legality of this marriage." Martha Alder snorted softly. "Unfortunate is what you call a cake falling, not a man breaking into a house." A few women near the front looked down, hiding quick smiles. Warren's eyes narrowed, but he ignored Martha. "Clara," he said again, voice lower now, as if speaking gently would make him kind. "You have made your point. Your father's control felt heavy. I understand that, but running west with a rancher does not solve anything. Come home. We can settle this quietly." "Quietly?" Clara repeated. "Yes. That is what you wanted from the start, is it not? A quiet wife, a quiet transfer of money, a quiet life where my name sat on papers but my voice never entered the room." The crowd went still. Warren's smile finally slipped. "You are overwrought." There it was. The old word, the old door closing. Clara reached inside her coat and drew out the packet of letters tied with ribbon. The paper edges trembled slightly in the wind, but her hand did not. "My mother was not overwrought when she wrote these." Warren's gaze sharpened. Silas Crow took one step forward in the crowd, then stopped. Sheriff Ward looked at the letters. "What are they?" "Proof that my mother placed part of her estate beyond my father's reach," Clara said. "Proof that she feared he would use my marriage to control it. Proof that I was told to leave if I was ever forced." Warren lifted a hand. "Private family letters carry no legal weight without verification." Tom Alder spoke from behind Clara. "Maybe not by themselves, but they explain why a hired tracker broke into her house looking for them." All eyes turned to Vane. The tracker shifted in his saddle. Warren's voice turned cold. Mr. Vane, I would advise silence. That was a mistake. Even a man as frightened as Elias Vane did not like being ordered in public when his own neck was already near the rope. Vane looked up. You advised plenty, he said hoarsely. Warren's face hardened. Sheriff Ward stepped closer. What does that mean? Vane licked his split lip. I was hired to bring her back before the county got involved. Pike said if the letters vanished and she was on the stage east, no frontier judge would risk crossing Judge Whitcomb. The crowd erupted. Warren took a step toward him. You lying rat. Nathaniel moved his horse half a step between Warren and Vane. Not much, just enough. Sheriff Ward raised a hand. Quiet. But the town was no longer quiet. Whispers rose. Women leaned toward one another. Men turned hard eyes on Warren. Some looked toward Silas Crow now too, as if suddenly remembering his smug confidence that morning. Clara felt the ground shift beneath the whole valley. Warren realized it as well. He straightened, forcing calm back into his face. A hired man facing charges will say anything to save himself. Sheriff, I have proper papers. He held out a folded document sealed in red. Ward took it. He read slowly, lips moving a little beneath his mustache. Clara watched his face. It did not reassure her. What does it say? Nathaniel asked. Ward looked up. It says Judge Whitcomb requests local authorities to detain Clara Whitcomb and release her to Warren Pike, designated representative of the family, due to alleged fraud and possible mental instability. Possible. Alleged. Words that had sharp teeth beneath soft skin. Does it bear a court seal? Martha asked. Ward examined it again. It bears Judge Whitcomb's personal seal. Not a court seal, Clara said. Warren's mouth tightened. My future father-in-law is a respected judge. Not here, Nathaniel said. Every head turned to him. He had spoken quietly, but the words carried with the weight of stone. Warren looked at him, as if noticing a mud stain. Mr. Reed, you are out of your depth. I expect I am, Nathaniel said. I do not know Virginia law. I do not know railroad money. I do not know how a man dresses threats in fine paper, but I know a woman standing in front of me saying she chose her life. I know a man broke into my house to take her letters. I know another man burned my barn to frighten her. And I know Mercy Creek has seen enough powerful men call theft business. His eyes moved briefly toward Silas. The crowd followed his look. Silas's jaw tightened. Nathaniel continued. You ask us to believe Clara is unstable because she ran, but I have watched her face fire, a loaded pistol, and the judgment of strangers with more courage than most men I know. If that is unstable, this valley could use more of it. Something moved through the crowd then. Not applause, not yet, but a shift, a softening, a breath. Clara looked at Nathaniel. She had thought courage was standing alone because no one was coming. Now she learned it could also mean letting someone stand beside you without taking your voice. Warren saw the change and reached for the only weapon left to him. Sheriff, he said sharply, if you refuse to honor my authority, Judge Whitcomb will hold this town accountable. Any person sheltering her may face legal consequence. Fear returned to the crowd. That was how men like Warren survived. When charm failed, fear took its place. Silas Crow stepped forward at last. I warned folks this would happen, he said. Reed brought a storm into Mercy Creek. Now every rancher and shopkeeper may pay for it. Is one woman's rebellion worth the ruin of a whole town? Clara turned toward him. There he was, slipping his knife between ribs while pretending to offer medicine. Before she could answer, Martha Alders stepped to the front of the crowd. I have buried 2 babies and 1 grown son in this territory, Martha said. I have fought fever with vinegar cloths, floods with sandbags, and hunger with flour stretched thin enough to see through. Do not speak to me of ruin, Selah's crow. Ruin comes when decent people hand the frightened back to those who harmed them because trouble is inconvenient. The women near the church steps went very still. Martha pointed at Clara. That young woman is not asking us to fight her family war. She is asking us to hear her say no. An older woman from the general store spoke next, surprising even herself. I heard her say it. Then Tom Alder added, so did I. One by one, other voices joined. I heard her. She said she married Willing. She has papers. Vane confessed. The words moved through the crowd like rain, beginning on dry ground. Warren's face changed from anger to calculation. He looked at the sheriff and saw uncertainty. He looked at the crowd and saw resistance. He looked at Clara and saw that she was no longer alone. So he reached for cruelty. Clara, he said, loud enough for all, have you told your new husband why your father truly doubts your judgment? A cold line ran down Clara's spine. Nathaniel looked at her, not with suspicion but concern. Warren smiled. Have you told him about the night your mother died? The crowd hushed again. Clara's breath caught. Do not, she thought. Warren took 1 step closer. Have you told him how a little girl disobeyed orders, slipped into the sick room, spilled the medicine lamp, and caused a fire that nearly killed 2 servants? Have you told him your mother's final fever worsened after you upset the whole house? Clara's heart seemed to stop. Nathaniel's face sharpened. Warren's voice softened into false pity. Your father has protected you from that guilt for years. He believed you were too fragile to carry truth. Perhaps he was right. The letters in Clara's hand blurred. Not because she believed him fully. Because some wounds did not need truth to bleed. She had been 12, her mother feverish, the room dark, a lamp tipping, smoke, shouting, her father's voice afterward cold and final. You see what comes from willful girls. Clara had buried that night beneath books, defiance, and flight, but it had followed her farther than any hired tracker. Warren saw her falter. There, he said quietly, you see, she is unwell. Nathaniel dismounted. He did not rush to Warren, he came to Clara. Slowly. He stopped in front of her and took the letters before they could fall from her hand. Then he looked at her, not the crowd, not Warren, not the sheriff. Clara, he said, look at me. She could barely breathe. If this is true, he said, it does not make you property. If it is false, it makes him cruel. Either way, you are not going back because a man knows where to press an old bruise. The first tear slipped down her cheek. I do not know what happened, she whispered. Then we find out, Nathaniel said, but not from him, not like this. A small voice came from near the back of the crowd. I know what happened. Everyone turned. An elderly woman stood beside the church gate, leaning on a cane. Her bonnet shadowed her face, but Clara knew her at once from the stage station earlier, though she had not known the woman's name. She had been one of the passengers from the eastbound coach, quiet and bent, wrapped in a gray shawl. Warren went pale. The woman stepped forward. My name is Abigail Mercer, she said. I was nurse in the Whitcomb house the year Mrs. Whitcomb died. Clara's world tilted. Abigail's eyes found hers, full of sorrow. And child, she said, voice trembling, you did not cause that fire. For a moment, no one in Mercy Creek moved. The old woman's words hung in the air above the church steps, trembling like a bell after the rope had been pulled. You did not cause that fire. Clara stared at Abigail Mercer as if the woman had stepped out of a dream she had spent 12 years trying not to remember. The town blurred at the edges. Warren Pike, the sheriff, Sela's crow, Nathaniel, the gathered faces, all of it seemed to tilt beneath the weight of that single sentence. "You knew my mother," Clara whispered. Abigail nodded, both hands resting on the top of her cane. "I nursed her the last 6 months. Your father dismissed me after she passed. I reckon now I know why." Warren moved quickly, too quickly. "This woman is confused," he said. "She is elderly and clearly mistaken. Sheriff, this circus has gone far enough." Abigail turned her tired eyes on him. "I may be old, Mr. Pike, but I am not confused." Warren's face tightened. Clara could not speak. Her throat had closed around years of shame. She remembered the sick-room door, her mother's thin hand reaching from the bed, the lamp glow, the smell of medicine, her father's voice after the smoke, telling her she had made everything worse, telling her a willful girl brought ruin wherever she went. Nathaniel stood beside Clara, close enough that his shoulder steadied the world without trapping her inside it. "Mrs. Mercer," Sheriff Ward said carefully, "if you know something about the Whitcomb family, best say it plain." Abigail looked at Clara first, as if asking permission. Clara forced herself to nod. The old woman drew a slow breath. Mrs. Whitcomb was dying before that night, not because of Clara, not because of any lamp. She had lung fever that settled deep and never left. The doctor knew it. I knew it. Her husband knew it too. Clara's fingers dug into her gloves. "The fire." Abigail's face folded with sorrow. "You were 12, child. You came into the room because your mother called your name. You were not disobeying out of spite. You were answering her." Clara's breath broke. "My father said I upset her." "Your father was not in that room when it started," Abigail said. "He came after the shouting began." Warren stepped forward. "You have no proof." Abigail lifted her chin. "I have memory." "Memory is not proof." "Then perhaps this is." From inside her shawl, Abigail drew out a small folded paper, yellowed with age and worn at the creases. Her hand shook as she held it toward the sheriff. Ward took it carefully. "What is this?" "A note Mrs. Whitcomb gave me 2 days before the fire. She said if anything happened, I was to keep it safe until Clara was grown. But Judge Whitcomb sent me away before I could reach the child. Then I was told Clara had been sent east to relatives. After that, I lost track." Clara shook her head faintly. "I was never sent east." "No," Abigail said. "I see that now. He kept you close so he could keep the story close too." The sheriff unfolded the note and read. His face changed as his eyes moved across the page. "Read it aloud," Clara said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, small but steady. Ward looked at her. "Mrs. Reed." "Please." The sheriff cleared his throat. "If my daughter is blamed for what illness has already decided, let this stand against that lie. Clara is not the cause of my decline. She has been the only light in this house. If I am gone, let no one use my death to break her spirit." A sound went through the crowd. Not whispering. A softer thing. A town hearing cruelty lose its mask. Clara pressed one hand to her mouth. The church, the sky, the road, all blurred through tears she could no longer hold back. Nathaniel's hand hovered near her elbow. This time she took it. She held on hard. Warren's voice cut through the moment. "A sentimental note proves nothing about the legality of today's matter." Abigail turned on him with sudden sharpness. "It proves you are willing to use a dead woman's sickness to frighten her daughter into silence." Warren's face flushed. Sela's crow stepped in then, smooth as ever, trying to pull the ground back before it slipped too far. "Whatever happened years ago is sad, but it is not Mercy Creek's business. The question remains whether this woman brought legal trouble into our valley. Martha Alder looked at him with open disgust. No, Silas, the question is why you are so eager to hand her over. Silas's eyes hardened. Before he could answer, Vane laughed from where he sat tied on his horse. It was a rough, ugly laugh, but every head turned. Silas went still. Vane looked at him and smiled through a split lip. You should have paid me more. Silas's face went white around the mouth. Sheriff Ward stepped toward Vane. What are you saying? Vane spat dust from his tongue. Crow met me yesterday, told me which road led to Reed Hollow, told me Reed had a spring worth more than the house, said if Pike took the woman quick, Reed would be ruined enough to sell cheap. The town erupted. Silas shouted, liar. Vane shrugged as well as tied hands aloud. I am many things, but I know when a man plans to leave me carrying blame alone. Nathaniel's hand tightened around Clara's. Sheriff Ward looked at Silas. Is that true? Silas laughed sharply. You will take the word of a hired criminal. Tom Alder spoke from behind the sheriff. We took your word for years, Silas. Look where that got us. A few ranchers murmured in agreement. Silas looked around, and for the first time since Clara had met him, he seemed to understand that charm had limits. He was no longer standing above the valley. He was standing in it, surrounded by people who had begun to see the tracks he left behind. Warren Pike tried one last time. Sheriff, I demand you enforce my papers. Ward looked at the document again, then at Clara, then at Abigail's note, then at Vane. No. Warren blinked. I beg your pardon. You have a personal request from a judge in another state, Ward said. Not a court order from this territory, not a county warrant signed here, and after what has been said today, I would be a fool to detain Mrs. Reed without proper hearing. Warren's voice dropped. You will regret this. The sheriff's tired eyes sharpened. Maybe, but I will regret it less than handing a grown woman to a man she says she fears. A murmur of approval moved through the crowd. Clara felt something open in her chest. Not peace, not yet, but space. A door inside her that had been locked since childhood had cracked and air was coming through. Warren stepped close enough that Nathaniel shifted, but Clara touched his arm. She wanted to face him herself. Warren looked at her with hatred now. The polish was gone. You think this makes you free? Clara wiped her cheeks with the back of her glove. No, she said. I think choosing truth is only the first step. You will be poor on that ranch, forgotten, tired before you are 30. Maybe. You will ruin your hands. They are mine to ruin. A few women in the crowd looked at their own hands then, red from washing, rough from work, strong from lives no fine man had ever praised. Warren leaned closer. You could have lived comfortably. Clara looked at Nathaniel, then at the dusty street, the church bell, Martha's fierce face, Abigail's trembling hands, and the hills beyond town. I would rather sleep free in a leaking house than sit polished in a parlor where my soul cannot breathe. Warren's face twisted. He lifted his hand, as if he might grab her arm right there before everyone. Nathaniel moved, but another hand stopped Warren first. Sheriff Ward caught his wrist. That is enough. Warren stared at him. Ward did not let go. You will remain in town until I wire the county seat. You will not approach Mrs. Reed without her consent. You will not send another man after her, and you will surrender any weapons while this matter is reviewed. Warren gave a cold laugh. You do not have authority. Try me, Ward said. For the first time all day, Mercy Creek's sheriff sounded like a lawman. The change was small, but the town felt it. Two men stepped forward to help. Warren looked from one face to another, calculating again, and then slowly removed the pistol from inside his coat. He handed it over with the expression of a man promising revenge without speaking the word. Silas began backing away from the edge of the crowd. Nathaniel saw him. So did Tom. "Crow," Tom called. Silas stopped. Sheriff Ward turned. "Silas Crow," he said, "you will also stay close. I have questions about that fire, the stolen rifle, and your dealings with Vane." Silas's smile returned, thin and dangerous. "You have no right to hold me." "Then do not run." The words had barely left Ward's mouth before Silas bolted. He shoved past two men, leapt from the boardwalk, and ran for his horse tied outside the saloon. For a heartbeat, confusion held the crowd. Then men shouted. Horses jerked against reins. Someone screamed for children to move back. Silas swung into the saddle and spurred hard toward the north road. Nathaniel was already running. "Nat!" Clara cried. He reached Samson in 3 strides, mounted clean, and tore after Silas before anyone could stop him. Tom followed. 2 more ranchers mounted behind them. Clara stood frozen, the dust from their horses rolling toward her. Every part of her wanted to chase too. But Martha caught her arm. "No, not this time. He is going after the man who tried to burn our barn. And you have another fight here." Clara looked at her. Martha nodded toward Abigail Mercer. The old nurse had lowered herself onto the church step, one hand pressed to her chest, her face gray with exhaustion. Clara rushed to her. "Mrs. Mercer." Abigail tried to smile. Too much excitement for old bones. Clara knelt before her, taking the woman's hands. "Why did you come west?" Abigail's eyes softened. "When I heard Warren Pike was traveling through St. Louis asking after a runaway woman named Clara Whitcomb, I knew it had to be you. I bought passage on the same line as far as I could. Thought maybe I would be too late." "You were not," Clara whispered. Abigail's fingers tightened around hers. "There is more, child." Clara's heart lurched. "More." The old woman glanced toward Warren, who now stood guarded near the sheriff's office, fury burning in his face. "Your mother's final will was not lost," Abigail said. "Your father lied. I carried a copy all these years." Clara could hardly breathe. Abigail reached into the hidden pocket of her dress and pulled out a second folded packet, sealed with faded blue wax. "This names you sole owner of your mother's Western land claim." "Western land claim?" Abigail nodded weakly. 40 acres north of Mercy Creek, with a spring on it according to the old papers. Martha drew a sharp breath. Clara looked toward the north road where Silas had fled, and sudden understanding struck like lightning. The North Spring. Nathaniel's disputed pasture. The water Silas wanted. It was not only Nathaniel's land. It was tied to Clara's mother. Before Clara could speak, gunshots cracked faintly from the hills north of town. The whole crowd turned. Clara rose slowly, Abigail's packet in her hand, her blood cold. Martha whispered, "Lord help them." Another shot echoed. Then another. Clara looked toward the dust trail where Nathaniel had disappeared, and the truth settled heavy in her chest. Silas Crow was not just running from the law. He was running toward the spring. The first shot echoed across Mercy Creek like a warning from the hills. The second made every face in the street turn north. By the third, Clara was already moving. "Clara," Martha said, catching her sleeve. "No." But Clara's eyes were fixed on the road where Nathaniel had disappeared after Silas Crow. Dust still hung above it, thinning in the afternoon light. The sound of gunfire had come from beyond the ridge, from the direction of the North Spring. from the place Abigail Mercer's papers had just tied to Clara's mother, from the place Silas had wanted badly enough to burn a barn, steal a rifle, and help deliver Clara back to men who would bury her voice. "I have to go," Clara said. Martha's grip tightened. "You are not riding into gunfire. My husband is there. So are 3 armed men who know the land better than you." Clara turned on her, breath sharp. "And Silas knows the spring better than any of them because he has been planning this for years. If that land claim is mine, if my mother's papers prove it, then Silas has more reason to silence anyone who knows." Martha's face changed. She understood. Behind them, Sheriff Ward was ordering men to saddle horses. Warren Pike stood under guard near the office porch, his fine suit dust-stained, his face pale with anger. Elias Vane sat tied and watched the town unravel around him. Abigail Mercer clutched her cane with both hands, trying to rise though her strength had nearly left her. Clara hurried back to the old nurse and took the sealed packet. "Mrs. Mercer, is there anything in this that can stop Silas?" Abigail's lips trembled. "The spring is named in the claim, Blue Rock Spring. Your mother bought it before she married your father. She always feared men would fight over water. She said land with water made a woman less easy to corner." Clara looked down at the blue wax seal. Her mother had not only left letters. She had left a road. Sheriff Ward strode toward them, rifle in hand. "Mrs. Reed, you stay here." "No." His jaw tightened. "This is not a church argument now. This is gunfire. And I am the person holding proof of why he is running." The sheriff stared at her. Martha spoke before he could argue. "She is right, Daniel. If Crow reaches that spring and destroys markers or papers hidden there, the claim becomes harder to prove." "Papers hidden there?" Clara asked. Abigail's eyes closed for a moment, searching memory. "There was a tin box," she whispered. "Your mother wrote that she placed one beneath the blue stone at the spring before she left the territory. I never knew if it was true." Clara's heart beat harder. A tin box. At Blue Rock Spring. Nathaniel had ridden into danger, not knowing that the water Silas wanted might carry Clara's mother's last protection. Sheriff Ward looked north again, as another distant shot cracked. "Fine," he said, "but you ride in the middle, not ahead, not alone. If I tell you to get down, you get down." Clara nodded once. Martha took her arm. "Then you ride my mare. Pepper is tired." Clara wanted to refuse out of pride, but she had learned enough since arriving in the West to know pride could kill a person faster than fear. She mounted Martha's bay mare, a steady animal named June, while the sheriff gathered 6 men. Martha insisted on riding too, and this time no one stopped her. Abigail remained on the church step with 2 women beside her, holding Clara's mother's first note in her lap like a holy thing. As Clara turned June toward the north road, she looked once at Warren Pike. He met her eyes. The polished man from the east was gone now. What remained was raw fury. "You will regret this," he said. Clara held his gaze. "No," she answered. "I regret only that I was taught to fear truth for so long." Then she rode. The road north climbed hard out of Mercy Creek, cutting through sage and scrub oak. The sheriff led the group, with Clara behind him and Martha at her side. The men rode fast but controlled, listening between hoofbeats. Dust rose around them. Wind pulled at Clara's loose hair. The blue wax packet lay inside her coat beside her mother's necklace and the earlier letters. The land opened beyond the first ridge. From there, Clara could see the pasture spread below, sunburned grass moving in waves, a line of cottonwoods marking the hidden spring. Beyond it, the rock face rose in broken shelves of blue-gray stone. Blue Rock. Another shot rang out. Closer now. The The sheriff lifted his hand, and the riders slowed. Clara's mouth went dry. Below, near the cottonwoods, 3 horses stood loose, one riderless, one limping, another tied to a tree. Men moved in flashes between the rocks. Then she saw Nathaniel. He was crouched behind a fallen cottonwood, rifle raised, his hat gone, dust streaked across one cheek. Tom Alder was behind a rock shelf to his left. One of the other ranchers lay on the ground farther back, moving but hurt. Silas Crow was near the spring. He had taken cover behind a cluster of blue stones, firing uphill whenever Nathaniel tried to move closer. His horse stood saddled behind him. Beside the spring, half buried near the largest stone, Clara saw fresh dirt. Silas had found the place. Or he was trying to. "Down," Sheriff Ward ordered. The riders dismounted behind the ridge lip. Clara slid from June, knees tight but steady. She could hear the water now, faint beneath gun smoke and shouts. A spring song, soft and stubborn, rising from the ground as if the land itself refused to be owned by fear. Sheriff Ward cupped his hands and shouted, "Crow, this is Sheriff Ward. Throw down your weapon." Silas's answer was a shot that struck a rock 10 feet away, throwing chips into the dust. Martha muttered something unladylike. Clara dropped low behind a mesquite bush. Her eyes searched Nathaniel again. He was alive, moving, but then he shifted position and she saw dark red on his sleeve. Her stomach turned. Nathaniel was hurt. She started forward without thinking. Martha grabbed the back of her coat. "Not like that. He is bleeding. And you running into the open will make him stand up to save you." That stopped Clara cold because it was true. Nathaniel glanced toward the ridge then, as if he had felt her before seeing her. Their eyes met across the distance. Even from there, she saw fear flash across his face. Not for himself. For her. He shook his head once. "Stay back." Clara's heart twisted. Silas saw the movement. His gaze followed Nathaniel's and found Clara on the ridge. His smile carried even through dust and distance. "Well now," he shouted, "the lady brings herself to the spring. That saves time." Nathaniel fired, forcing Silas back behind the rocks. Sheriff Ward moved lower along the ridge, signaling 2 men to circle wide. Tom Alder shouted from his cover, "Silas, it is over. You have nowhere to go." Silas laughed. "This spring made fools of you all. Reed thought it was his. The judge's daughter thinks it is hers. But I have spent 5 years paying taxes on nearby lease lines, recording improvements, watching surveyors make mistakes. By the time any court untangles it, I will own this water or no one will." Clara looked toward the fresh dirt near the blue stone. The tin box. If Silas destroyed it, her mother's claim might become only one more disputed memory. She crouched lower and moved along the ridge behind the brush. Martha hissed Clara. "I can reach the lower wash," Clara whispered. "It runs behind the spring." "You cannot." "I can. He is watching Nathaniel and the sheriff." Martha looked furious, but she looked too long. That meant she knew Clara was right. "You get one chance," Martha said, "and if I call your name you drop flat." Clara nodded. She slid down into the shallow wash, keeping low as rocks scraped her palms. Dust filled her mouth. Her skirt snagged on dry brush. Above her, men shouted, rifles cracked, and bullets struck stone with a sound like hammers on iron. She moved forward foot by foot. No grand bravery, no clean courage. Just fear, breath, dirt, and the thought of Nathaniel bleeding while her mother's truth lay under a stone. At the end of the wash, Clara reached the cottonwoods. The spring was close now. She could smell wet earth. The air was cooler beneath the leaves. 10 yards away, Silas crouched behind the blue stones, his back angled partly toward her as he fired toward Nathaniel. Beside the largest stone, fresh dirt had been scraped loose. Clara saw the corner of a rusted tin box. Her breath caught. She reached for it. A twig snapped beneath her boot. Silas turned. For one frozen second, they stared at each other. Then he lunged. Clara grabbed the tin box with both hands and pulled. It stuck in the soil. Silas caught her arm, fingers digging hard. "You meddling little fool," he snarled. Clara twisted, but he was stronger. The box tore free as he dragged her against the rocks. She clutched it to her chest. Silas raised his pistol. Nathaniel shouted her name. The sound ripped across the spring like thunder. Clara did the only thing she could. She drove the tin box upward into Silas's wrist. The pistol fired wild. Birds burst from the cottonwoods. Silas cursed, staggering back. Clara fell, the tin box still in her arms. Nathaniel came out from cover despite his wound, running toward her. Silas lifted the pistol again, this time toward Nathaniel. A rifle cracked from the ridge. Martha Alder stood with smoke curling from her barrel. Silas's pistol flew from his hand and landed in the spring. For half a breath, everyone froze. Then Sheriff Ward and two men rushed from the side, tackling Silas before he could reach another weapon. He fought like a cornered wolf, but the fight had gone out of the day. Within moments, his hands were bound, his face pressed into the dirt beside the very water he had tried to steal. Nathaniel reached Clara and dropped to his knees. "Are you hit?" "No," she gasped. "You." "Arm only." "Only?" she repeated, half laughing, half crying. He touched her face with his good hand. There was mud on his fingers and blood on his sleeve. His eyes were wild with relief. "I told you to stay back." "No," she said, breath shaking. "You looked it." Despite pain and fear, his mouth curved. "That is worse." The sheriff dragged Silas upright. "This valley will hear about this," Silas spat. "All of you will regret touching me." Tom Alder stood over him. "Silas, we have regretted not touching you sooner." Martha lowered her rifle and walked down to Clara. Her hands trembled only after the danger had passed. "I was aiming for his wrist," Martha said. Clara stared at her. "You hit it." "Good, I would hate to waste a bullet on his pride." A broken laugh moved through the men nearby, thin but real. The kind of laugh people make after death steps aside. Clara looked down at the tin box in her lap. It was rusted, dented, and sealed with old wax under a strip of leather. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside lay oilcloth, carefully wrapped. Beneath that were land papers, a survey map, and one final letter in her mother's hand. Nathaniel knelt beside her as she unfolded it. The words were faded but readable. "My Clara, if you are holding this, then you found the water I meant to leave you. A woman needs more than money if men around her believe they can take all else. She needs ground beneath her feet and a place where no one can send her away. This spring is yours. May it give you the freedom I could not live long enough to teach you how to claim." Clara pressed the letter to her mouth. This time the tears came quietly. Not from fear. From the strange ache of being loved across years. Nathaniel's hand covered hers over the paper. "She knew you," he said softly. Clara looked at him. "For years I thought she died disappointed in me." "No," Nathaniel said, "she died fighting for you." The spring moved beside them, clear water slipping over stone and into the grass. It had been hidden beneath disputes, lies, claims, and greed, but it had never stopped flowing. Just like the truth. By the time they brought Silas back to Mercy Creek, the sun was low and red. The town watched in stunned silence as Sheriff Ward led him past the church steps in tied hands. Warren Pike stood on the porch under guard, his face gray now. When he saw Silas captured and Clara riding with the tin box tied safely to her saddle, His last hope seemed to drain from him. Abigail Mercer cried when Clara placed the recovered letter in her lap. She remembered, the old woman whispered. Yes, Clara said, kneeling before her, and so did you. Nathaniel stood nearby while the doctor bound his arm. He never took his eyes far from Clara, but he did not call her over, did not claim the moment. He let her have it. That may have been the thing that touched her most. Later, as twilight gathered, Sheriff Ward locked Silas Crow and Warren Pike in separate cells until the county judge arrived. Vane agreed to make a full written statement. The town that had whispered about Clara that morning now watched her with something quieter and far harder to earn. Respect. Not from everyone, but enough to begin. If this moment touched your heart, stay with the story, because some truths do not heal the moment they are found. Sometimes the hardest part is learning how to live free after a life spent inside fear. That night, Nathaniel and Clara rode home under a wide violet sky, with Martha and Tom following at a respectful distance. No one spoke much. The day had taken too many words from them. At Reed Hollow, the house stood waiting. The barn still wore its black scar. Boone and Sally limped out to greet them, tails weak but happy. Nathaniel dismounted slowly, favoring his injured arm. Clara reached to help him, then stopped. He smiled faintly. Do not tell anyone. I needed help getting off my horse. I would never ruin your fearsome reputation. You already have. She laughed softly, and the sound felt new in the yard. Inside the house, Clara placed her mother's letters, the land papers, and the blue stone necklace on the table. Nathaniel lit the lamp. Warm light filled the room. For the first time, the house did not feel like his past or her hiding place. It felt like a beginning. But as Clara looked at the papers, one detail on the survey map caught her eye. A boundary line. She leaned closer. Nathaniel, she said. He came to her side. What is it? She pointed to the old map, her finger resting on the marked edge of Blue Rock Spring. This line, she whispered, it does not stop at the spring. Nathaniel bent over the paper. His expression changed. The old claim covered the spring, the lower wash, and part of the north pasture Nathaniel had believed belonged to him through his father. Clara looked up slowly. Her mother's freedom and Nathaniel's home stood on the same piece of land. And by law, if the paper was true, Reed Hollow's best water did not belong to Nathaniel. It belonged to Clara. For a long while, neither Clara nor Nathaniel spoke. The lamp flame moved softly in the draft, bending and straightening inside the glass. Outside, the night settled over Reed Hollow with the familiar sounds Clara had only just begun to know. A horse shifted in the corral. The creek whispered beyond the cottonwoods. Boone sighed on the porch as if the whole day had worn him out down to his bones. But inside the house, the old survey map lay open on the table like a fresh wound. Clara kept her finger on the boundary line. Nathaniel stood beside her, his injured arm wrapped in clean cloth, his face half-shadowed by lamplight. He stared at the paper without anger, but the silence around him grew heavy. This was your father's north pasture? Clara asked quietly. Nathaniel took a slow breath. My father fenced it before I was born. He always said the claim was messy, but he paid fees when he could. After he died, I kept using it. No one challenged it until crows started circling. And now my mother's paper challenges it. His jaw tightened. Looks that way. Clara pulled her hand back from the map, as if the ink had burned her. All at once, the freedom her mother had left her felt like a knife laid between them. She had spent years dreaming of a place no one could take from her. Yet the place had turned out to be tied to the only man who had ever asked her to choose. Nathaniel must have seen the fear rise in her face. Clara, I do not want to take your water. You are not taking anything. If that paper is true, then I already have. He looked at her then, and the quiet pain in his eyes nearly broke her. No, he said, men like Crow take, men like Pike take. Your mother left you something so you would not have to beg for safety. And what about your safety? A faint, tired smile touched his mouth. I have lived with uncertain land papers most of my life. I reckon I can survive one more night. This is not a joke. No, he said softly, it is not. The room fell quiet again. Clara looked around the little house. The rough table, the old chair, the patched roof beams, the shelf of books. The place had been built by Nathaniel's hands and haunted by his losses. She thought of the first evening he brought her here, ashamed that it was plain. She thought of him giving her the bedroom, standing at the door with a rifle while the world came for her, letting her speak when other men would have spoken over her. She could not repay that by becoming another person with a paper in her hand and power over his life. I will sign it to you, she said. Nathaniel's head lifted. No. Yes. No, Clara. It is your pasture. Your cattle drink there. Your father worked it. You bled there today. And your mother saved it for you. She saved it so I could be free. Then do not begin your freedom by giving it away out of fear. The words stopped her. Nathaniel stepped closer, careful with his bandaged arm. If you sign it to me tonight, you will always wonder if I loved you or the water. If I accept it tonight, I will always wonder the same about myself. That is not fair. Most true things are not. Clara looked down at the map, blinking hard. What do we do then? Nathaniel studied the line for a long moment. Then he took a pencil from the shelf, sat down, and drew a small circle around Blue Rock Spring. We go to the county judge tomorrow. We record your mother's claim proper. We record my father's improvements proper. Then we make an agreement that the spring belongs to you, but Reed Hollow has permanent water rights as long as this ranch stands. Clara stared at him. You would accept that? I would be a fool not to, and I have been a fool enough already. Her mouth trembled. Nathaniel. He set the pencil down. Listen to me. I asked for a plain woman because I was afraid of wanting anything bright. I asked for quiet because I was afraid of hearing my own heart wake up. I asked for someone who would not disturb my life because the life I had was all I thought I deserved. His voice roughened. Then you stepped off that train with storm in your eyes, and every rule I built started falling. Clara stood very still. He reached for her hand. You did not tame my soul by becoming gentle for me. You tamed it by making it brave enough to live again. Tears slid down her cheeks, but this time she did not hide them. I thought I came west to escape, she whispered. Maybe you did. And now you get to stay because you choose it. She looked at their joined hands. His were rough, scarred, warm. Hers were scratched from the wash, stained with dust, no longer the soft hands Warren Pike had expected to own. They are mine to ruin, she had told Warren. But now she understood something deeper. They were also hers to build with. The next morning, Mercy Creek watched another kind of ending unfold. Not a chase, not a gunfight, not a woman dragged into a stagecoach under false papers. This time it was ink. The county judge arrived near noon, stern-faced and gray-haired, but not easily bought by Eastern names. He listened to Sheriff Ward, read Vane's sign statement, examined Abigail Mercer's papers, and sent 2 wires east. By sundown, Warren Pike's authority had collapsed into smoke. Judge Whitcomb's personal seal meant little in Colorado territory without a lawful order, and Warren's attempt to remove Clara by force placed him under serious charge. Silas Crow did not smile again after the judge read the statements against him. The valley learned that his leases were tangled with false claims, unpaid debts, and pressure put on smaller ranchers. He was taken under guard to the county seat with Warren and Vane, each man facing the kind of justice that came not from revenge, but from truth finally spoken in front of witnesses. Abigail Mercer stayed in Mercy Creek. Martha Alder would hear no argument and brought her into the Alder home until Clara could prepare a proper room at Reed Hollow. The old nurse wept when Clara asked her to come live near the spring. "I am not useful like I once was," Abigail said. Clara took her hands. "You remembered me when it mattered. That is useful enough for a lifetime." A week later, the agreement was signed. Blue Rock Spring was recorded in Clara Reed's name, as her mother had intended. Reed Hollow received permanent water rights, written clear and witnessed by the sheriff, the judge, Tom Alder, Martha Alder, and half the town that had once whispered behind Clara's back. When the ink dried, Nathaniel looked at Clara across the table. "Mrs. Reed," he said, "seems you are my landlord now." Martha laughed out loud. Clara gave him a serious look. "Then I expect rent." Nathaniel's brow lifted. "What sort?" She leaned closer. "One honest life, no locked doors, no silent suffering, and coffee made before sunrise." "That is a hard bargain." "You married a difficult woman." His eyes softened. "No," he said, "I married the right one." Winter came early that year. Snow silvered the roof of the barn and softened the scar where the fire had blackened the boards. Nathaniel repaired the kitchen roof before the first hard storm, though Clara stood below handing him nails and giving advice he pretended not to need. Together they fenced the spring properly, not to keep people out, but to mark it as something protected. In town, not every whisper died. Some never do, but other voices grew louder. Women came to Clara quietly at first, asking about riding astride, about reading contracts, about writing letters without a husband's hand guiding the pen. Martha said change on the frontier moved like wagon wheels through mud. Slow, messy, but moving all the same. One evening, months after the train had brought Clara into Nathaniel's life, they stood beside Blue Rock Spring while sunset burned gold across the hills. The water ran clear over the stones. Abigail sat nearby in a chair Nathaniel had carried from the wagon, wrapped in a quilt and smiling at the sound of the creek. Clara wore her mother's necklace openly now. Nathaniel stood close, his shoulder brushing hers. "Do you ever miss the life you left?" he asked. Clara looked west, where the sky seemed wide enough to forgive anything. "I miss who I might have been if my mother had lived," she said, "but I think she found a way to meet me here." Nathaniel followed her gaze to the spring. "I think she did too." Clara slipped her hand into his. The land around them was not easy. It would bring drought, snow, loss, hard mornings, and nights when the wind rattled the windows like old fears trying to get in. But it would also bring coffee at dawn, horses breathing in cold air, laughter in a repaired kitchen, and two people choosing each other again and again without chains, without ownership, without silence. Nathaniel had expected a plain frontier bride. Instead, Clara had arrived with wild beauty, a broken past, and a truth strong enough to shake a valley. And in the end, she had not shattered his rules to ruin him. She had shattered them to set them both free. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional Wild West stories where love, courage, and truth find a home on the frontier. Years later, when travelers passed north of Mercy Creek, they often stopped at the clear spring beneath the blue stones. They would see a strong woman with auburn hair working beside a quiet rancher with kind gray eyes. Sometimes they saw them laughing near the fence. Sometimes they saw them standing hand in hand as the evening light turned the water gold. And those who knew the story never called it Reed Hollow only. They called it Clara's Spring. because it was the place where a woman stopped running, a lonely man learned to live again, and the truth flowed free at last.